I suppose, Patrick, the problem we have is that nobody really values our marine economy as they should.
Yeah, and it's so critical for our coastal communities. Like it staggers me living in the coastal communities, watching our young people disappear
Yeah.
from the landscape again. We've massive resources and massive opportunities, as I took advantage of when I was growing up and managed to stay around, and it just staggers me to think that here we are again, and through no fault of our own, like that
Yes.
we're in this situation where 29% of the water now is Irish.
Yes.
Of the European, we're contributing 29% of the waters.
Yeah.
Yet in reciprocal terms, we get around 5% on average of the whitefish. Some are a little bit higher, but some are lower.
Yes.
So we'd say around 5% is the average. So that's 5 in every 100 fish that we get to keep to sustain our economies and keep young people in our communities and everything else. Whereas 95 then go back to the other countries
Yes.
to sustain their coastal communities from predominantly our waters. And I find that incredible.
It's incredible, and the problem really goes back to 1983 when we joined the EU and the Common Fisheries Policy, doesn't it?
A little bit earlier, we joined in the Treaty of Accession in 1973,
Of course,
but,
yeah.
but they put their plan together in 1983.
Yeah.
But I've described this story, you've heard me say this now a number of times, is that, imagine a German person going with an excavator over to Africa where they found
Yes.
the diamonds, and he's digging for the diamonds, and he's doing well, and one of the locals comes up and knocks on the window and says, "What are you up to,
Yeah.
And he hands him a shovel, and he says, "Off you go." So he goes with the shovel, and next year the German comes back, the season starts again, and he sees out the side of the window, he sees the guy that he gave the shovel is inside an excavator as well. And he goes over, he knocks on the window, and he says, "What are you up to?" And your man says, "Well, thank you very much. You gave me the shovel, you gave me the opportunity to start off to match you and in my own land,
Yeah.
to be equal with you. Equal opportunities, equal rights, right?" But the German person, and just say German now, not picking in any race or greed like that, we just use them for an example, turns off the key and says, no, you have to go back to the shovel, because when we started last year, you had a shovel, I had the excavator.
Yeah.
So that's the way it's going to stay. And to me, that's the same way that I view the fishing. So 1973, they set the parameters of this. We were at a complete disadvantage because all the fish were on our doorstep. We didn't have to go hundreds of miles into the ocean to get fish because it was so abundant there. And we didn't have the population to generate the markets. So I understand we need Europe for the markets, but the trade-off is not equal. We get 5% of the fish, but then that means we've only 5% of our fish going onto the market outside, even less because we take some of it at home. So it's not fair. And this reminds me of the time of colonialism, where European countries went out into Congo and out to Africa and everything else and set up shop, and but all that's given back now. So the last remnants of those age and that way that the Europeans took over and took other people's resources, the only remnants of that now is Ireland's fishing resources around the coastline. And we're not greedy. We know that it's a shared resource, but we only want enough to sustain our fleet. We're the ones that are being put out of business, and that's what staggers me.
It's important. There's two things that are important about all of that. One is that we need to create an awareness of how important this sector is to us. For us in the coastal communities, the seafood business is like the Intel for us in terms of employment, social economy, and so on. And the second challenge we have is to try and get to a situation under the Common Fisheries Policy Review where we address those issues. And our fishermen are totally committed to sustainability and having a livelihood into the future. But we need a fair share. I suppose what we have to try and realise basically is that these fish are in our zone, in our waters. So we've got what's called zonal attachment. And we have to create an argument around that. They're our fish and they need to give us a fair share of that catch.
Yeah, because we don't have opportunities in the other countries' waters.
No.
We don't go to their waters and catch the fish. Very little, and we even see with bluefin tuna. Right? It's a prime example of how the system itself for me is broken. We actually have a documentary on file where it showed that there was an actual fishery created in bluefin tuna, and we brought over the markets, we brought over the Japanese to come over and buy these fish. Yet because they picked the reference years that didn't include that years that they were fishing, we got no quota. Now you can imagine that the Japanese themselves say, one bluefin tuna, new Toyota. That's how valuable these fish are to sustain our coastal communities. These fish then are coming into our waters, and they're eating all the local fish, we'll call them, right, that are there. So they're devouring the fish that we are trying to catch. And when that happened in the Faroes and above in Norway and Iceland, they all looked for a quota when new fish entered their waters, like they did with the bluefin. So they have a quota now for bluefin in their waters, which is a real valuable resource. And yet they're trying to catch it in our waters, and we have no quota. And that, to me, is the fundamental problems with the legislation that's out there at the moment. And I can't find out in my own head how anybody cannot bring that argument to Europe. And if we are a civilised and fair and open society with equal rights and equal opportunities and a level playing pitch, which is the foundation of the common fishery policy from Europe, how they can't see these inaccuracies and correct them.
How did we end up here, Patrick, really?
What happened is that we didn't have value in the diplomatic side by the people who weren't fishermen, you know, of what this was worth. Others valued it.
Yes.
So, like, we always hear that it was traded off for other rights and other areas of our economy that we felt on the political side and the civil service side were more important to the country and to the public as a whole, right?
Yeah.
But for me, that's not correct. That's, you know, if you're going to be protective of the most weakest and the most vulnerable in your society, that's the mark of a society, how good you are, how well you treat the most, you know, at risk. And the fishermen are at risk. So the people that went out of the country didn't represent us, and they still aren't representing us as far as I'm concerned. And the problem is that we have in the same positions, the same people for decades. So it's very hard for somebody that has a mindset to change that mindset when they believe, well, no, this is the way we should do it, like. And the way that we should do it is proven, is the way that they want it done, which is decommissioning. So we shrink the fleet to match the opportunities that we're allowed to have from Europe, and not ask for, well, hang on a second, there are other laws that are governing why we put this together and the sustainability of the fish, but it's the sustainability of our coastal communities. Like, this isn't about coastal communities and just about fishermen. They're just the first person. So they're like the manufacturers that create the raw material, and that raw material is passed on to the next chain, and that money and that economic driver benefits everybody.
A reduction of 30% in our whitefish fishing fleet, that's gone forever, isn't it?
Yeah, you see, like, it's not anybody's individual right to own the rights to earn a living at a public resource, right, in my view. So it wouldn't be my right to sell on somebody else's ability to earn a living from the sea later on, you know. So it's a case of that you have to think of the future generations. I don't think that's being taught about here. It's a case of, well, we'll shrink it now and we'll deal with the question today and we won't worry about tomorrow. Sure, this resource is the only resource that is the most renewable on the planet.
Yes.
Because, you know, you don't put anything into it, you can take from it. You can manage it, make sure it's sustained, and you don't take too much out to damage the recruitment, and you keep on top of it for the other variable changes that are inside in the industry.
Yeah, I think it's really important that we understand that our members, the fishermen, they're fully committed to sustainability. They want the fish there to be there in the future years. And to have the procedures to make sure that they survive.
And you're after jogging my brain now into another aspect of that, right? So people might think that vessels go out to sea and they just throw net out over the side, and it's a free-for-all, and that resource is just abundant and they can come in and make them. But fishermen spend as much money in maintaining the boats now and keeping up the code of practice as nearly as they earn from the boats.
Yes.
So basically what they're doing is they're earning a living. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And they're keeping their asset, because their asset deteriorates, but they have to keep it up. The sea is a dangerous place at the best of times, so the equipment you have to out there has to be top notch. And they're even required now, just like in medicine, just how medicine has improved and you went from MRI scans and from radiology, it's the same for fishing. They have to put the best of the technology on board now to meet the requirements of the regulations, because the opportunities are being narrowed. They have to get better and better at the jobs to just catch the fish that they're allowed to catch. And these are mixed stock fisheries, like, so you can't just go out and throw out a net and catch as much as you want in each species. You have to narrow it down. But the money that they invest inside the boats, like, it's not the tens of thousands, it's the hundreds of thousands. And they're willing to put in that investment continuously into their boats. So of course they want to keep the resource going, that'll pay for that. And that's all they want to do. Each fishing expedition is an expedition, like.
Yes.
So they have to take on debt before they ever leave the pier. I don't think there's any other walk of life or any other industry that gambles with what they gamble with all the elements that are there. And they do so willingly. And it's a skill set that if we lose, we won't replace.
No.